Join us as we take a whirlwind tour, sampling the diverse rail fanning opportunities that can be found around the midsection of Kentucky. We caught everything from ground-shaking ballast trains and hot intermodals to dinner trains operated by RJ Corman. Auto trains are big business, as Kentucky is home to many auto manufacturing plants, and we captured plenty of them running during our visit. Watch in awe as heavy freights compete with street traffic right through the middle of town. Long steel trestles aren't hard to find, and we will show heavy trains traveling across several of them. We will also see Paducah and Louisville performing switching duties. Some of Union Pacific's SD90 Mack locomotives found a new home on the Norfolk Southern, and we caught some of them in action for you to enjoy. We will finish off our program chasing trains from two different operating railroad museums in the area. This is Central Kentucky Rails. We begin our program with the CSX Mainline subdivision. We will work our way northward from Bowling Green to Lebanon Junction, with stops at select locations between, such as Upton, Sonora, Glendale, Elizabethtown, and Colesburg. In downtown Bowling Green, the local approaches with two cars in tow. The local will clear the main track here and position the cars to serve a nearby metal scrapyard. The preserved E-unit seen off in the distance sits in front of the former Louisville and Nashville Bowling Green station, which is now a railroad museum. As the E8 and a few historic cars look on, a southbound stack train rolls through town. The classic 1925 station is on the right. In 1953, the L&N took delivery of 4 E8A units, 794 through 797. Unfortunately, all 4 met their fate with the scrapper's torch. So to get an E-unit to display the proud colors of the Louisville and Nashville accurately, a replica was needed. Although rebuilt to look externally as accurate as possible, this unit has no prime movers inside. Originally, this engine served the Chicago and Northwestern. After working for a few other roads, it made its way to the Arkansas Railway Museum in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, before being acquired in 2006 for its permanent display here. just south of Upton, a northbound climbs the grade by Leesville Cemetery. The Louisville and Nashville Railroad was chartered by the Commonwealth of Kentucky in 1850. This line, running between the two namesake cities, actually predates the Civil War, having been opened for service in 1859. By 1863, the L&N was the only railroad to cross Union and Confederate territories as Kentucky fought for the North, while neighboring Tennessee fought for the South. The young railroad found itself to be the point of contention many times. The L&N also operated under one name continuously for 132 years and represented one of the great success stories of American business. Today, CSX operates this line and hauls a wide variety of freight over its rails, including autos. A few miles further north is the town of Sonora. Here we caught a southbound mixed manifest cruising through town. A northbound comes into Glendale with a general merchandise train. This town was once known as Walker's Station before changing its name to Glendale. Another northbound is seen passing the downtown area. 9 miles to the north of Glendale is Elizabethtown. A northbound enters Kentucky's 10th largest city with more mixed freight under threatening skies. At the north end of town, a southward manifest splits the signals on a cloudy day. This view shows the train taking the crossovers as it switches off the main track onto the 17,000-foot-long siding. A laced CEFX unit leads a southbound auto train through Colesburg. This view shows the beginning of the steepest grade on the line between Louisville and Nashville. This train will ascend Tunnel Hill for about 5 miles before descending another 5 miles into Elizabethtown. We're at Lebanon Junction. At this location, the Lebanon Branch splits off from the double-track mainline sub and heads east. Just after a major downpour, a local slowly makes its way onto the branch, which is right behind our camera position. Construction on the Lebanon Branch began in 1857 and gave the town its name. This line was 77 miles long and took trains toward Mount Vernon and beyond. Passenger service on this line ended in the 1950s. After that, coal trains from the Appalachian Mountains traveled this route. Due to multiple branch lines in the area and L&N's merger with Seaboard System and later CSX Transportation, the decision was made to abandon this line as a through route altogether. The last through freight traveled over the line in the summer of 1986. Today, the Lebanon Branch leads to the Kentucky Railway Museum, which operates an 11-mile segment from New Haven to Boston. We'll visit the museum at the end of our program. A northbound auto train waits for the local to clear so it can proceed. However, a southbound will come from behind us first, making for a three-way meet here. Only moments later, a northbound Highball's out of town. Note the remains of an old coaling tower in the background. Just southwest of Louisville, we visited the CSX Texas line, which runs between Louisville and Evansville, Indiana. We found a great tree-lined location in Otter Creek Park, not far from the Fort Knox Military Reservation, and caught 3 trains rolling through. Only about 15 minutes after setting up to shoot whatever CSX wanted to throw our way, a 2-car track inspection train is spotted heading west. A short auto train, led by an SD-50, follows the inspection train about an hour later. Later in the day, a much longer auto train passes through the seemingly endless row of trees as it heads west. We now pay a brief visit to the RJ Corman Railroad. We will begin with a freight arriving at the CSX connection located at Memphis Junction, south of Bowling Green. Then we travel north to Bardstown and catch a few run-bys of My Old Kentucky Dinner Train, which RJ Corman operates using a pair of classic FP7 locomotives. Running on a former L&N branch line that ran from Bowling Green to Memphis, Tennessee, RJ Corman arrives at Memphis Junction and will soon deliver interchange traffic to CSX. A pair of X-Penn Central GP38s are on the point. Richard J. Corman established the company in 1973 and remained in charge for the next 40 years until his death in 2013. The railroad currently operates in over half a dozen states and employs about 1,400 people. The Memphis line was opened in 1861 and was made possible through a joint effort by the Louisville and Nashville, the Memphis and Ohio, and the Memphis, Clarksville, and Louisville railroads. Sadly, portions of the line have been abandoned in the 80s, so it's no longer a through route. Let's travel 100 miles north to Bardstown, home of My Old Kentucky Dinner Train, and watch RJ Corman's FP7s at work. This excursion train runs in a northwesterly direction on 18 miles of track that was originally laid in 1860 by the Bardstown and Louisville Railroad, which was later incorporated into the Louisville and Nashville. A GP9 will lead the train for its return trip. Both of these FP7s were built in 1950 and spent a good portion of their careers on the Southern Railway. In 1987, RJ Corman purchased this track from CSX and a year later began running its dinner train and has made a successful operation out of it. Just west of Samuels, the train passes through a typical forested scene, giving the passengers a great view of the Kentucky countryside. The train approaches a road crossing west of Deatsville. The train continues on to Limestone Springs and will then head back to Bardstown. The regional Paducah and Louisville Railway was captured in 2 locations in central Kentucky. Our first position was in the town of Cecilia, southwest of Elizabethtown, and our second spot was in downtown Louisville, the eastern terminus for this railroad. A pair of locals are based here in downtown Cecilia. In the morning, a single GP38-2 is seen heading toward the junction and will enter the Elizabethtown branch, seen in the foreground. The local will pick up its train before heading west to serve a few customers in the area. The Paducah and Louisville operates on a 223-mile line between its namesake cities, as well as branch lines extending from Paducah to Kevel and Mayfield, and from here to Elizabethtown, which is 5 miles away, giving this Class II railroad a total of 270 track miles. All its trackage was purchased from the Illinois Central Gulf in the summer of 1986, as that road wanted to concentrate more on its north-south route. The P&L has increased the amount of traffic on its line, which was a vast improvement over the light amount of car loadings on rickety track that was experienced by the ICG. 3807 started life in October of 1984 as a Cotton Belt GP40-2, number 7261, and has since been rebuilt without a turbocharger, effectively making it a GP38-2. However, the three large fans remained in place above the radiators. Note the covered hopper behind the engine with its Milwaukee Road lettering. On another day, we caught Sister Unit 2131 switching a long cut of tank cars on a rainy morning. We sought refuge under the roof of a preserved Illinois Central caboose in a nearby park to avoid getting drenched. Number 2131 is a GP40-2, and as you can tell, still maintains its turbo. In downtown Louisville, 2131 is now coupled with 3811. Both units are seen making a switching move on the edge of their Oak Street yard. P&L handles many types of freight, including coal, grain, lumber, chemicals, and heavy equipment. One of the drawbacks of chasing this regional railroad is that many of their through trains run at night. We had to settle for these daytime switching moves. CSX runs between Louisville and Cincinnati on their LCL subdivision, otherwise known as the Short Line. This is a fairly heavily used stretch of track, and we caught trains at Whips Millgate, Grange, Worthville, Eagle Station, as well as the daylighted Eagle Tunnel. We will finish this chapter with a look at a couple of trains crossing the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Covington, Kentucky. An eastbound manifest approaches the Whips Mill Road crossing. A steep grade in the area keeps throttles wide open for this pair of Dash 8s in order to move the heavy tonnage eastward. Kentucky was originally part of Virginia. In 1792, Kentucky became the 15th state admitted to the Union. It's also one of only 4 states that can truly be called a commonwealth. It is 40,409 square miles in size, 140 miles maximum from north to south, and 379 miles from east to west. About 4.4 million people call Kentucky home, and it's also considered the most indigenous state in the country, meaning most people who live in Kentucky tend to spend their whole lives in Kentucky. It's also known as the Bluegrass State, which is a nickname based on the bluegrass that's found on many of its pastures due to the fertile soil. About 15 miles to the east, the same track makes its way down the middle of the street right in the heart of downtown Grange. Speeds are limited to 10 miles per hour until the head end clears the street running and then increases to 20 until the whole train is clear. On the day of our visit, a storm was passing over the area, dumping lots of rain. Fortunately, the rain eased up just long enough to let us shoot 2 trains, one in each direction, before the skies opened back up, forcing us to search for drier weather. Automobile traffic was rather light this morning, as this was Memorial Day 2015. Kentucky has a typically humid, subtropical climate and gets an average rainfall total of 46 inches per year, making stormy scenes like this fairly common throughout the year. In a scene that has changed little in the past century, many businesses continue to thrive as this area will be swarming with crowds later in the morning. The trains represent nothing more than a temporary rolling wall until the last car clears. Only minutes later, a local makes its way westward down the street. Further east, an eastbound approaches about a mile east of Worthville. An unexpected surprise for us was this westbound auto train near Eagle Station, powered by a pair of Canadian National units. The lead engine is a former Illinois Central SD-70, the last engine built new for that road. Near Glencoe, a westbound mixed freight passes through the former Eagle Tunnel. In early 2005, the 636-foot-long tunnel, built in the 1870s, suffered a partial collapse and was fully daylighted a few months later. In Covington, we get a great view of the CSX main line. The tracks are elevated for more than a mile in the area. An eastbound, having left Queensgate Yard minutes earlier with mostly empty flats, passes by an aging signal bridge. These tracks were originally laid by the CSX predecessor, Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. Kentucky's northern border is formed by the Ohio River. Immediately on the other side lies the state of Ohio, and specifically the city of Cincinnati. The trains tend to go slow as they travel over this stretch, but we'll take it. From the same spot, we see another eastbound, this time crossing right over the Ohio River on the classic C&O truss bridge, with the Cincinnati skyline forming the backdrop. This bridge was built in 1929 and replaced the original bridge that was constructed in the 1880s. By the time these trains were filmed, it was getting pretty rare to get a solid consist of units in the older Bright Future paint scheme. A local hotel, complete with balconies, makes these elevated scenes possible. As the train trails off, we get one last look at the great view of the Cincinnati riverfront seen from our hotel room balcony. Complete with a shoving platform, a local heads for a nearby industry with a string of tank cars near Riverside, Ohio, a few miles to the west of Covington. We're standing on the Kentucky side of the river. We will now work our way southward from Cincinnati toward Danville along Norfolk Southern's 1st District of their Central Division main line. Along the way, we will make stops at Erlanger, Sherman, Hilltop, Sadieville, Lexington, Highbridge, and Falconer, just outside Danville. The distance between these 2 points is about 110 miles. A southbound intermodal has departed Norfolk Southern's Guest Street Yard and crosses over the Ohio River on former Southern Railway trackage. There's a bit of an interesting history involving this line. This is part of the Queen and Crescent route, Cincinnati being the Queen City and New Orleans known as the Crescent City. Due to fears of losing important shipping traffic along the Ohio River during the 19th century, the city of Cincinnati took upon itself to build a railway and develop its own rail infrastructure. The Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railway was created and ran from here to Chattanooga, Tennessee. The line that operated it was the Cincinnati Southern Railway. This route was opened for service in 1880 at a cost of more than $18 million and is owned by the city of Cincinnati and leased to the CNO and TP under a long-term agreement. It's the only long-distance railway owned by a municipality in America. Originally, the track was built as a 5-foot broad gauge, but was converted to standard gauge in a mere 13 hours in 1886. Today, Norfolk Southern keeps these rails shiny, with an average of 2 to 3 trains per hour on this vital link. About 10 miles to the south of Cincinnati is Erlanger, Kentucky. Here, a preserved 1877 depot houses a museum and is the last remaining wooden depot between Cincinnati and Chattanooga. A steel coil train heads south in front of the depot. Since a park is also located here, families can enjoy a picnic with a railroad-oriented view. On northbound approaches with one of the recently acquired former UP ST90 Max leading. At Sherman, an all-EMD consist powers a southbound manifest train late in the day. Mixed merchandise, autos, and intermodal make up the bulk of the traffic seen on the 1st District. Although a few coal trains can occasionally be seen, much of the coal traffic utilizes other lines in eastern Kentucky. Currently, double track becomes single track southward from this location. We set up at Sadieville in time to catch this northbound passing through. This town grew up after the railroad was built here in 1876 and was incorporated 4 years later. In the historic town of Lexington, a northbound splits the signals as a storm approaches. Lexington is Kentucky's second largest city, topped only by Louisville. Lexington is known as the horse capital of the world and was founded in 1775, 17 years before Kentucky became a state. President Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, was born and raised here. The two made several visits to this town after their marriage in 1842. Less than 20 miles away is the location known as High Bridge. A small, unincorporated community nearby, once known as North Tower, was renamed in 1888 after the landmark High Bridge. This was the location of the very first cantilever bridge in America and was built in 1876. The original bridge was replaced in 1911 with this structure, which carries trains about 300 feet above the Kentucky River. The bridge is 1,125 feet in length, the tallest bridge over a navigable waterway in North America, and the tallest railroad bridge in the world until the early part of the 20th century. Originally in 1850, the Lexington and Danville Railroad attempted to build a suspension bridge supported by stone towers at this location, but was never completed. Traces remained of the stone towers until 1929. Today, the bridge carries several dozen trains daily, including this southbound manifest. A nearby park allows for this impressive view of the bridge. Less than 9 miles away is Falconer. A lightly used overpass makes for a great photo location. A southbound hotshot with a city rail unit comes through at track speed. Another southbound follows close behind. Also located here is the junction for Norfolk Southern's Louisville district that takes trains toward Youngstown Yard in Louisville, about 70 miles to the northwest. In the distance, a coal train sits on the main, waiting for a fresh crew to arrive. A northbound auto train has just departed from Danville only minutes earlier and cruises by the junction at a fast clip. As long as we're next to Norfolk Southern's Louisville district, let's catch a few trains at select locations. We'll see some action in Harrodsburg, Waddy, and Buchel before returning to the CNO and TP. In Harrodsburg, the main line goes right through residential neighborhoods, as this westbound auto train demonstrates. At Waddy, another westbound auto train comes through. Buchel maintains a preserved C&O caboose in a 4.5-acre park in addition to the town's depot, which was moved here in 1989 from its original spot less than a mile away. An empty steel coil train heads eastward through Buchel. Back on the old CNO and TP, we continue southward from the town of Danville. From Danville to Oakdale, Tennessee, it's known as the 2nd District. This part of the line is better known as the Rat Hole, due to the steep grades and numerous tunnels and bridges that were made necessary during the line's construction. We will see action in Danville, Junction City, South Fork Bridge, Science Hill, Greenwood, Whitley City, and Stearns. The distance covered here is about 75 miles. Coming into Danville, a southbound manifest train approaches. The two main lines keep their distance and take slightly different paths between here and Falconer. Until just a few years ago, Danville was a crew change point. The new crew change is now handled at Burnside, near Somerset, 50 miles to the south. Danville is still a convenient refueling stop for most trains in either direction. This town was originally known as Crow's Station, but was renamed Danville in 1787. In 1860, a fire devastated the city and destroyed 64 buildings, causing $300,000 in damage, which was a lot of money for the time. Today, the town of 16,000 is thriving and is the seat of Boyle County. In the 1960s, many changes were made on the rat hole to improve operations. Between 1961 and 1963, the Southern Railway embarked on a major project which eliminated most of the tunnels with many cuts and line locations. This also resulted in easier grades and fewer curves. Norfolk Southern maintains a modest yard in Danville, but since the crew change point was eliminated, the yard is reduced in importance. The old Southern Railway Danville station still stands as an aging testament to railroading's glory days. The only train we saw during our visit that didn't stop for fuel was this southbound hauling autos and mixed merchandise. The three units work hard as the train ascends a slight grade coming into town. Further south, we caught a pair of northbound freights coming into Junction City in the early morning. Moments later, a stack train comes off the siding and heads south. South Fork Bridge is a favorite spot for rail fans. This impressive span carries trains over the Green River. We captured a southbound intermodal train coming across in the afternoon. A slow order about a mile south of here causes the train to reduce its speed. An oil train follows about an hour later. We're at the small community of Science Hill as a northbound approaches. Just north of Greenwood, a southbound manifest, led by ST-70 Ace number 1094, grinds up grade through one of the many deep cuts that can be found along the modern-day rat hole. A major double-tracking project is resulting in improved service on the busy 2nd District. Less than a mile south of the previous train, another EMD product leads a manifest train into Greenwood. A southbound stack train makes its way up the grade. The trailing SD70M-2 was making enough noise, it could be heard for several miles in either direction. At Whitley City, a southbound manifest passes underneath us. The 2nd District goes from single to double track here, and a northbound loaded Herzog ballast train waits for the train to clear so it can proceed. Only minutes later, the ballast train is on the move as tree shadows play across the track under the late afternoon sun. The engines begin to work hard getting the heavy train up to speed. An empty coal train heads north through Stearns. Stearns was once a prosperous coal and logging town. In its heyday, up to and including the 1920s, the town served as a hub for a logging and mining empire and controlled more than 200 square miles of land. The Kentucky and Tennessee Railway was constructed early on, and the world's first all-electric sawmill could be found here. Over 2,200 people were employed, living and working in at least 18 coal camps. Today, historic Stearns is a town of 1,600 people and generates much of its revenue as a tourist town. The Big South Fork Scenic Railway is also based here, and we'll see more of this classic operation next. We will now get a brief sampling of the Big South Fork Scenic Railway, which is a tourist line running on about 8 miles of Kentucky and Tennessee trackage. We will see their train as it departs from Stearns, and then catch another run-by near its western terminus at the old Blue Heron coal mine. Much of this line is inaccessible except by rail. Less than a minute after its departure, the tourist train is seen making its way out of town. The standard power is this 1951-built SW9, which originally served the Atlantic coastline. The train will make a brief stop in front of a small lake so a switch can be thrown after the train clears. About a mile from Blue Heron, the train prepares to cross a steel girder bridge over a creek. A short distance away, the train has turned on a Y track and will be seen pushing the 4 cars into Blue Heron. The train lays over for a couple of hours, giving the tourists a chance to visit the gift shop and museum. Under a park-like setting, just a short walk away, is a coal tipple, which was all recreated in the 1980s as an outdoor museum. The public is welcome to come in and take a peek at how life was like for many years in this isolated area when coal was king. The underground mines were abandoned at the end of 1962 due to lack of profitability. Let's pay a brief visit to a pair of museums in central Kentucky. First will be the Bluegrass Railroad Museum, located in Versailles, and the second will be the Kentucky Railroad Museum in New Haven. A former Illinois Central GP-8 stands guard at the Bluegrass Railroad Museum as their weekend train makes its departure for a 5.5-mile trip to Tyrone on tracks that were laid by the Louisville Southern Railroad in the 1880s. Today's power is a GP-9 painted up for the Norfolk and Western. The museum was founded in 1976 by some members of the Bluegrass Railroad Club, which is a model railroad group. Equipment was acquired from local railroads and stored at the old L&N yard in Lexington and later to the Bluegrass Army Depot grounds in Avon. In 1988, the museum moved to its current location on 9.5 acres on the outskirts of Versailles. Today, the museum is popular with tourists who want to see the Kentucky countryside in the relaxed setting of a leisurely train ride. The train continues on its way to Tyrone. Roughly 60 miles west of Versailles is New Haven, home of the Kentucky Railroad Museum. We will follow their weekend excursion train west to Boston and return to the museum. Our former Reading GP7 number 309 provides today's power, leading 4 of the museum cars. The museum is located right next to downtown New Haven. The train will travel about 11 miles in a northwesterly direction to Boston. This is part of the old CSX Lebanon Branch that splits off from their mainline sub, which we somewhat discussed earlier in our program. The Kentucky Railroad Museum was created in 1954 and was originally on 6 acres of land in Louisville, where the Louisville soccer fields are currently located. In the 1970s, the museum moved to Ormsby Station in Jefferson County to avoid flooding problems that were encountered at their first home. In 1990, the museum opened for business at its current location on 8 acres next to downtown New Haven, and excursions have been ongoing since 1991. Surrounded by trees, the 4-car train continues on its way. At Boston, the museum train arrives and will stop short of the road crossing. Here, the passengers are free to disembark and stretch their legs. The train will then continue a short distance to a runaround track so that the GP7 can be placed on the other end for its return trip. The train will now move ahead to the siding. A volunteer switches the siding and checks to make sure the switch points line up properly. At Nelsonville, the museum train is making good timing as it heads back to New Haven. Downtown New Haven will be the parting shot for our program. Watch for more exciting programs from Pentrex.